All right, sixth grade. It has come to my attention that you haven't been taught the different rules. I will make sure that this is taught better next year. I believe you should have learned this in fourth, maybe fifth grade. But that's fine. We can learn it now. No big deal. So when you are dealing with integer, and remember the word integer is just talking about a number, okay? That is just another way to say number, a real number. And yes, we'll get into imaginary numbers later. So there's four basic rules, I guess would be the best way to say that. When you're dealing with addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So these are the rules I want you to write in your journals. Make sure you're writing this down. Keep it handy for when you're doing the assignment. When you're doing addition, and let me try my highlighter, see if I like that better. You are going to be adding two negative numbers, then you know your answer is going to be negative. A negative plus a negative goes further negative. If you're adding two positive numbers, your answer is going to be positive. You guys already know that one. Now let's talk about subtraction. When you're subtracting two different signs, a negative and a positive, you take the sign of the largest absolute value. So when you talk about absolute value, that's the number that's furthest away from 0. So out of that -5 and the 9, 9 is bigger. So you actually subtract 9 minus 5 to get 4. And the reason you know it's a positive 4 is because the number 9 is bigger than the number 5. Again, if I have another negative plus a positive, in this case, the -13 is if you get rid of the negative, 13 is bigger than 8. So if I do subtraction, 13 minus 8, I know the answer is negative because that 13, just the number itself, is bigger than the number 8. Okay? So now when you deal with subtraction, this is where it can get a little tricky. If you have a negative minus a positive, you can change the signs to make it addition. So if you're subtracting, then I can say it's actually a -3 plus a -4. Another way to think about that is if I have a let me grab my marker. If I have a -3 minus a +4, I could just say -3 minus 4. Well, a -3 minus 4 goes further negative to be a -7. So think of this as a number line. If I'm already here at -3, here's 0, and I'm subtracting 4, I go 4 more this way to get to -7. And we're going to do some examples, guys. Make sure you're writing this down. Okay, same thing. If I have a negative, if I have a negative minus a negative, when you have those two negatives right next to each other, they become positive. So it's like saying -5 plus 9. Well, then you can go back to this rule over here and say, well, the 9 is bigger, so I know this is a +4. Okay? Then when you're dealing with multiplication and division, if you're multiplying or dividing by two negatives or two positives, the answer is always positive. If I'm multiplying a positive and a negative, then I'm going to have a negative answer. So same sign. If I have a positive times a negative, I get a negative. Sorry, that was the different sign. I get so distracted by myself sometimes. Okay, so same sign. Meaning if I have a positive times a positive, I'm going to get a positive. If I have a negative times a negative, I'm going to get a positive. Different sign. If I have a positive times a negative, I get a negative. And then if I have a negative, man, I'm having trouble writing today. Positive times a negative, negative, negative times positive, negative. Basically, always remember if there's two different signs, the negative always wins. All right, so let's practice a handful of these just to get used to it. All right, so if I have -1 times 7, okay, we're multiplying, and they have different signs. We have a negative and a positive, so I already know the answer is going to be negative. Because anytime you have a negative times a positive, the negative wins. So now I just do 7 times 1, which would be -7. Okay? All right, what about this one? This is division, and they have the same sign. Remember, if I have a division and I'm dividing a negative divided by a negative, my answer is positive. Now, you don't have to write a plus sign, but your answer is positive. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. So then I just do 42 divided by 7, which gives you 6. So it's a positive 6. That's the key. A negative divided by a negative equals a positive. Okay? All right, let's try another one. All right, so this one we have a negative number subtracting another negative number. When you see a negative next to a negative like that, even if they stick this in parentheses, it's still a negative next to a negative. Change that to plus. So essentially I'm saying this is -2 plus 8. Well, now you just look at this and say, well, the 8's larger, so then I know it's a positive answer. 8 minus 2 is 6. So then my answer would be 6. Okay, negative next to a negative, like this, makes it a positive. Okay, so again, we have a positive plus a negative. Okay, so when you have two signs next to each other, if it's a positive and a negative, it's just the negative. So I could essentially say this is 1 minus 6. Well, 1 minus 6, then minus 6 is larger, so I know my answer is going to be a negative. And then 6 minus 1 is 5. So my answer here is -5. Okay? I know I'm doing a bunch here, but I'm trying to give you a bunch of different ideas here. All right, so this one's multiplication. Okay, when I'm multiplying and I have a negative times a positive, if you look at the rule, two different signs when you're multiplying a negative and a positive, the negative wins. And if you're dividing, it's the same thing. So we already know this is negative. Then I just multiply 8 times 5, which is 40. So your answer is -40. Good. All right, so we have -6 minus 4. So this is one I want to show you because it's a good example. If you're visual, use a number line, guys. There's nothing wrong with that. So if this is 0, my first number I need to put on the number line is a -6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is here, -6. And then I'm going further -4 more. The reason I say further negative is because it's subtraction. On a number line, when you do subtraction, you go to the left. Subtract. When you're doing addition, you go to the right. So in this case, it's subtraction, right? -4. So I'm going to go 4 more. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, that reaches to the -10. So -6 minus 4 goes further negative to get to -10. If at any point you need to rewatch this, rewind it or pause it and think about it, that's fine. All right, so now we're doing division. We have a negative divided by a negative. A negative divided by a negative is always a positive. So essentially I could just ignore those two negatives. So all I have to do here is 27 divided by 9. 9 times 3 is 27. Done. Okay? Negative divided by a negative is a positive. Here we go. I think I wrote this earlier, didn't I? Negative divided by a negative is a positive. I do think I wrote that. Okay, so we have negative 6 plus a negative 8. All right, let me show you how this one would work. When you have two signs next to each other, a negative and a positive, the negative wins. So I could essentially write this as negative 6 minus 8. Okay, if I were to do a number line, 0, let's say this is at negative 6, because that's the first number. Then I have to go 8 more, right? So this went negative 8 more. Well, to find this number right here, I went 8 more than this negative 6. So I could say 6 plus 8 equals 14. But I'm in the negative zone here, so I make sure I put a negative in front of that. So the answer would be negative 14. Okay? Because I have a negative 6, and I went further 8 more times to the negative. Hope that helps. All right, I think I have more to show you. Yeah. Okay, so in this one, we have a positive 6 minus a negative 10. Again, you have two signs right next to each other. A negative and a negative right next to each other make it a positive. So this is essentially 6 plus 10. Well, now it makes it really easy, right? 16. Okay, so work on your IXL. If you have any problems with that, let me know. But this should give you all the rules. Again, make sure you've written your notes down and have all the rules that we started off at the beginning of this lecture. Okay, all of these rules are important. All right.